Hello and welcome. I'm Dr. Adam Dorsey, a psychologist in Silicon Valley, and I am the host of Super Psyched, a podcast dedicated to supercharging your life. Each episode contains fun, high-quality interviews with experts looking at psychology from all angles. Super Psyched is your tool to get more of what you want in your life and less of what you don't. Intuition. We've all felt it. I know for me at least, there have been times when I have listened to it and it's been to my benefit. When I haven't, it's often been to my detriment. How can we improve our access to our innate gift of intuition? Is there science to support developing good habits around intuition? Can it help us in our personal and work lives? The answer to these appear to be a resounding yes, and today's expert will give you some great tips. Rick Snyder is the author of Decisive Intuition, a book that I found fascinating and very useful. He is also the founder and CEO of Invisible Edge, a consulting firm that develops intuitive intelligence for business leaders. Rick has been featured in Forbes, The Economist, Inc., CNBC, Fast Company, and on live TV. Listen in as Rick and I do a deep dive into the science of intuition. Rick Snyder, welcome to Super Psyched.
Thank you, Adam. Great to be here with you.
Oh, so wonderful. Rick, I've been a fan of your work for some time. As I mentioned in the intro, I've read your book. It's fantastic. I've used facets of your book in the work that I do with people in my own office. But just to kind of get people up to date, what is your definition of intuition?
Yeah, my definition of intuition is a little bit different than the standard of what's out there. And I'll just name the standard first. Basically, when you look in the dictionary, it is knowing something inherently without the need for conscious reasoning. So it's those intuitive moments or the hunches where we just know something. We don't have to think about it. Now, how I define it is a little different because I'm trying to create a training in a way of accessing our intuition and our intuitive intelligence in a way that's practical, in a way that we can actually relate with and deepen that relationship with every day. So my definition is intuition is an embodied knowing that comes from listening or sensing what wants to happen next. So I'm going to break that down a little bit further.
I love it. An embodied knowing that comes from listening to what wants to happen next.
What wants to happen next.
Oh, beautiful. Yes, unpack it.
So the first part is so important. It's an embodied knowing. It's not just coming from my head. I have to be willing to let go of all that I know in my rational, linear thinking, take a few breaths, and actually drop into my whole bodily experience. And the research shows this, that we get our information through our neuroreceptors that are located throughout our whole body, our whole neural network. And we can get into the science of that later.
Sure, and I can't wait.
The idea is that it's not just in our head. We're actually getting information all the time as living antennas that are moving in the world, that are picking up broadcasting signals and information and emotions and energies all the time. So it's an embodied knowing that comes from listening to what wants to happen next. So it's actually a dialogue. It's actually a relationship. I'm actually asking a question like, oh, what wants to happen next in this business decision or in my personal relationship? Like, why do things feel so flat between us? What wants to happen next? Or a dispute with my kids. What wants to happen next in my relationship with my kids? So you're asking that question in an active way and then listening to what your intuitive senses are revealing to you.
There's something so interesting about the sentence itself. What wants to happen next? It's a passive question in a sense. What wants to happen next? It's not something linguistically that probably even resonates with people when they first hear it.
And it's really good that you picked up on that, in that most things that we're trained to do, we're trained to hunt and seek.
Yes.
In our culture, especially in America.
Oh, absolutely.
We're hunters and seekers, not gatherers anymore.
Goal-oriented. Let's go get it.
We don't even gather anymore.
But let's just go get it.
Right. And so we're so drilled to, find laser focus, find that thing, 10x your business. We're so hyper-focused in our different ways. And America has a great There's a lot of upsides to that, of course.
Sure.
There's also a lot of downsides.
Of course.
And so that's where there is something that's reflective about what wants to happen next. How do I send out my signal, and how does life respond? How do I actually have a relationship and a dialogue with life? That's the bigger context here. And that means I have to get out of my ego agenda mind of me, I know better. I know the right answer. I'm the expert. I'm the VP in the room. And how do I actually put that on pause for a moment and humble myself and ask the question out loud, or with my colleagues, or just to myself in a quiet moment?
Gosh, there's something so beautiful about that idea of having a greater relationship with life during this time that we are here. One of the things that you're really providing people tools with is to be more alive while they're alive.
100%. That's it right there. Yeah. So if you think, and just like I can look at my own life, where how many days have I sleepwalking through Monday through Friday,
totally
waiting for Saturday, and then I sleepwalk through my weekend somehow.
Yeah. And it's like, am I alive?
Right. And then one of the great upsides, once again, of this whole pandemic experience is it's shaken the snow globe, and we're resettling everything in a whole new way. So I know most people I'm speaking with are appreciating, wow, it's a whole new day today, and it doesn't feel like any other day right now. And there's something fresh about, what do I want to create in this space? So you're right. How do I be alive while I'm alive? How do I feel that aliveness? If I'm in relationship with life in real time, that's how I'm connected with the greater ecosystem, versus the disconnection that this whole pandemic is revealing to us on a global level.
Yeah. And I love the idea of an antenna. That makes me just so happy to imagine us walking around with antennas, and you fortifying those antennas. I get this image of a bicep muscle and an antenna, almost like that would be like a logo for the pursuit of empowering our intuition. I just think there's a reason why I so badly wanted you as a guest. And I think people need to hear about this, because really this is not something we are ever taught in any academic situation. And you even mention the research that there are basically 3 sources, almost 3 brains from which we can gather intuition. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, this is one of the core elements that they found in the last... They've actually known about the gut brain for about 100 years, but that actually got lost in the shuffle over the decades, and it's resurfaced again in the last 20, 30 years now. So we have the head brain that everyone knows of, we have the heart brain, and we have the gut brain. And just to give a sense of the perspective, the head brain has about 86 billion neurons in our network up here. And of course, it's our command center. It is where we do our critical thinking, our imagination, so many great things that our head brain gives us every day. Our heart brain actually is where we have our sense of connection. And that's where we feel a lot of literally emotional intelligence, energetic intelligence, relational intelligence. So this is a big part of our intuition also in reading out if body language feels good to us, if it feels neutral or threatening. We can sense that if people open, or is my audience open when I'm speaking to them in the room, or do I need to shift something to feel even more connected to people on the other side? And we literally have 40,000 to 120,000 neurons in our heart center. And it literally stores memories and emotions in that specific area also.
Amazing.
One of my favorite stories, which you can read about, is where they've had these experiments where they have a heart transplant to a new host, and that new host will have memories and emotions that are not native to them. They're native to who originally had the heart that was donated.
Oh my God. Really?
And the creepiest story I have to share really quick, where a young girl died and she gave her heart to another young girl. This young girl started having nightmares and night terrors.
Yeah,
the recipient.
Well, obviously, yes.
Yeah, the recipient. She started to have night terrors in these very vivid scenes of a murder. It turns out the original young girl was murdered, and because the heart stored that information, this new recipient was able to share that with the police and the FBI, and they actually found the killer, and they eventually convicted him because of her dreams that were so visceral that she was reporting from her heart intelligence.
Could she even describe the physical appearance of the murderer?
Yeah, she was able to describe the murder scene, his characteristics, how it happened in great enough detail where they found the guy. And
it seemed to the forensic experts that this could not be a coincidence. She was describing what actually happened.
100%.
Amazing.
This is incredible. And here's another story. For people who want to go deeper into this, the Heart Math Institute does really amazing work, and they're based in the Santa Cruz Bay Area. And they're really bringing a lot of research and science to this one field. Here's another example. They did an experiment where you either are going to be given good news, neutral news, or bad news. And so there's a script for each one. And then they have electrodes and, galvanic skin responses for the person who's just in the room. And then they're going to, the good news, bad news, or neutral news are going to approach you. And you don't know which one it is, but they were detecting the heart through its electromagnetic circumference was able to detect with accuracy if good news was coming toward you, bad news, or neutral news.
Before it was given.
Before it was revealed, the actual script was revealed.
Amazing.
So think about this. Everyone in the business space or any organization, we're doing this all the time. We're picking up intuitively on our signals and cues around us all the time, but so often we don't give ourselves credit for that. Or we give someone the benefit of a doubt perhaps, and we don't acknowledge the scratch in the record that just happened.
One of the cool things about you, Rick, is that you've been able to bring intuition into the traditional workplace. You've worked with really big companies, very traditional companies as well. And I'm wondering, how do you explain something as difficult to wrap one's head around as intuition to them so that they say, you know what? Yes, Rick, we need this for our team.
Yeah, there's two ways that I do that. I just want to mention the gut brain also really quick.
Sure.
So that one. But the gut brain is also our very first brain we all have. It's our primordial brain. Literally in the embryo, it's the gut brain that develops first, and then the heart, and then the head, which is interesting. And the gut brain has 500 million neurons stored in the gut. And it's the only organ that can tell the head brain no. It can actually override the head brain because the gut is all about survival. It's all about what needs to happen right now, no BS. Are we going left or right? Mm-hmm. Is this relationship over or not?
Yeah.
And so the gut has that potency to it.
And how many times have I heard something akin to, in my office, I just knew I shouldn't marry this person. My gut was telling me, and of course, years later, that was corroborated by X, Y, and Z, or all along.
I hear this all the time. I work with a lot of even recruiters and directors in HR directors, and a lot of times they'll know. Gosh, my gut told me not to hire this person, and yet my colleagues were all a big fan, so I went with it. And I did.
Right. All of the data on the CV indicated this was a hire.
Yes.
And my gut said no.
They went to Stanford.
Right.
They should be a perfect shoo-in.
How do you not? So back to this idea of somehow bringing intuition into the workplace. I'm just blown away that you've been able to do that, and so glad that you have, because I think it has extraordinary applications on the corporate sphere. Can you tell me, how do you explain it so that somebody who might be very business-minded, perhaps very traditionally data-minded, would say, yes, okay, we need to learn this too?
Yeah, so here's a couple ways. I think in any kind of teaching modality, you have to learn the language of the person you're speaking to, and you have to learn their metaphors.
Right.
And when you start to learn that really helps translate your message. And so, for example, we have worked a lot with R&D lab leaders of major corporations, and we're bringing intuitive intelligence and actually showing them how to use that in decision making. Now, these are real hardcore scientists, right, who spent their life testing and building new products that have never existed before, and plastics and all kinds of crazy materials. And the thing I really appreciate about scientists, they get that intuition is actually part of the scientific method.
Right.
Because if you think about the scientific method,
Of course.
one of the first steps is, I have a hunch about what if we tried electricity this way?
Yeah.
What if we used this part of the AI bot for this kind of faster communication over here on our software?
Right.
I have a hunch that might actually work better.
Uh-huh.
Right?
I'm laughing because that's just such a great, yeah, of course, Rick. Oh, keep going.
It's of course, but it's like so close we don't see that.
So great. Yeah.
Because so often what we've done in our current era is we've worshiped the mind and the rational, and we've actually minimized the interconnection that we all have all the time. And our subconscious is what allows us to connect those dots. And that's where our intuition lives. It doesn't live in the linear thinking. It lives in a place even deeper, in a place that can process information 500,000 times faster than the conscious mind. That's where we're that dialed into our environment when we let go of our thoughts for a moment and tune into what's happening in the space. So when I bring in the science and the latest research on the subconscious and the processing speed of our subconscious versus our rational thinking, I see the heads nod in the room and people get it. And sometimes I just ask them the simple question, have you ever had a strong gut instinct about something and you didn't listen to it?
Mm-hmm.
And even the biggest skeptic always eventually raises their hand because they've had that experience.
Everyone in the room raises their hands.
Yeah, we've all had an experience where we felt something and we didn't listen to it.
Totally.
Whether it's a relationship or it could be career-wise, it doesn't matter the context. But we can all relate to that somehow.
Yes, I know I certainly can. Before we go on, is there any other science that just delighted you in terms of intuition?
I think the other thing that Candace Pert brought, she wrote a book called The Molecules of Emotion. And she was one of the ones who discovered that we actually have neuroreceptors in almost every cell of our body. So that's where we do have these neural centers of the three brains that I talked about, but we actually have a whole neural network throughout our whole body. That's why it's important to really practice slowing down and taking some breaths and being more embodied as a leader and using all of your senses to feel through a situation, not just being in your head analyzing, but what happens when you deepen and drop into your whole bodily experience and get curious. That's where we literally have neuroreception, where we're then able to, through the vagus nerve that goes from the gut all the way to the brainstem,
right? That's
where information then travels from the body to the head to make sense of our experience. And this is, by the way, marketers have known this for over 100 years. You know, marketers were the first ones to really bring psychology into the business space overtly of how to influence people.
Can you give an example of that?
Yeah. So one of my favorite stories in the book is Edward Bernays, who was one of the most famous marketers of all time. They call him the godfather or the father of spin.
Mm-hmm.
And he was actually, you're going to love this, he was the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
Wow.
So Uncle Siggy taught him the tricks. Said, hey, look at the book I'm about to publish. What do you think?
Yeah.
And so he learns from his uncle about how to actually influence the unconscious drivers of how we make decisions. And so he did this whole experiment. One of his marketing clients was the Beech Nut Packing Company, where they sold bacon. And this is an interesting fact here. The American diet in the 1920s or so was still the standard European continental diet. So they would have, a bread, some jam, maybe some butter, and a coffee or tea. And that was pretty much the American diet.
Right.
So he actually gathered all these doctors and said, hey, would you endorse that when we fall asleep, we lose a little bit of energy, so we need a hearty breakfast to recover from our lack of the energy that dissipates in our sleep.
Right.
So therefore, we need eggs and bacon.
And you're winking at me for those who can't see Rick. He's giving me a good wink, saying,
There's the bacon moment. So if we have eggs and bacon, we can have a hearty breakfast. And he got 5,000 doctors across the U.S. to endorse that. It was published in all the newspapers in the day. And within 30 years, he changed the American diet to bacon and eggs and potatoes of when we think about the American hearty breakfast.
Amazing. Just incredible. And that's certainly how I was raised. I remember in second grade learning from my teacher that we lose energy when we sleep, and we therefore need to make breakfast the most important meal of the day.
Yes.
That's so we have we have Sigmund Freud's nephew to thank for that.
So that's where marketing has led the charge in bringing just being curious about the subconscious mind and how do we make decisions, and that we actually make them emotionally before we make them rationally. Like right away, we get a feeling if we like the color of that car or not, or the feel of the interior. And then later on, we either, substantiate that or not.
Exactly. So we kind of go from the stomach up.
Exactly. So that's where we have to also be careful about prejudice and bias. Mm-hmm. Because I'm hiring someone in front of me and maybe I don't like how they're dressed.
Exactly.
Or I don't like their posture, and I'm projecting my own stuff onto them.
Sure.
And so how do I know if it's an intuition or if it's a bias of mine?
Exactly. Well, what might be some ways that we can differentiate between bias and intuition?
Yeah, so this became a really critical question, because we're trying to once again isolate intuitive intelligence from the inner critic, the voice of the inner critic, and all of the judgments and the biases that we also have. And so one of the things that we have found is that in science, different aspects of the amygdala, the reptilian brain, get lit up when we have emotional reactive moments. When we have intuitive moments, it actually lights up different parts of our brain. It still lights up the emotional center of the amygdala, but it also lights up the orbital frontal cortex and the neocortex, which is actually where our third eye is located. Mm-hmm. So the Chinese and the Indian systems nailed this one millennia ago. Mm. But literally, that's our decision-making center that's also tied to our intuition. And so when both are activated, when we have intuitive moments, it shows that up in functional MRIs.
Sure.
So there are some literal differences in physiology around emotional reactivity versus intuition. And by the way, on a side note, I think this is why most people don't trust their intuition. They're confusing intuition with emotional reactivity.
Right.
And they're right to not trust their emotional reactivity. If I'm really charged or triggered about something, I shouldn't trust necessarily the validity of my thinking in those moments. So one of the things we do in intuition training with leaders is we get them to slow down. If they're a little bit emotionally reactive, we get them to a stable place through their breathing techniques that get them to stabilize. And then they can ask the question, or then they can suss out, oh, is this person actually feel like a good hire from this place versus where I was 5 minutes ago when I was ready to condemn them. And just to give people two more practical tools, if you're in an interview or any situation around discernment and decision-making.
Sure.
When your bias or prejudice is up, two things happen. You're much more emotionally charged about the situation, like we just said. So your blood pressure is rising. You're emotionally charged. You can feel your tightness in a situation. And then the other thing is there's a lot of narrative and story that starts to show up. And so you might have all this story about the person in front of you that you don't really know. Like, wow, they look just like my brother when he smiled. I don't like my brother. This guy, he creeps me out. I don't know, he probably is going to, peter out of this company anyway in a month. He doesn't seem trustworthy. Like, I don't know all those things necessarily. Right. But if I have a lot of story about it and it's not going away, that's probably a good indicator I'm coming from some kind of emotional reactivity or bias.
Sure.
Versus what we notice about intuition when, and this comes from hundreds of hours of research that we've done on our team around researching leaders of how they use intuition in their businesses, plus our own experiences, plus all the science and research out there. Here's what most people report. And think about this if you're listening to this podcast right now. When you get an intuitive signal, it's usually non-dramatic. It's usually very clear and sometimes really quiet. And it can just be a simple, oh, go left. Oh, this person's not a fit for the team. But there's not a lot of drama and story about it. Mm-hmm. It's just very clear. Now, I might have an emotional feeling about that later, but in the moment of intuition, it's just very like a bell. Mm-hmm. Clear like a bell. Like, oh, this relationship is over. Now, I might once again have feelings about that come up.
Absolutely, later on.
for sure. But in the moment, it's that dawn of clarity.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm talking about?
I get it completely. I'll just try to articulate it in my own words that there's, as you said, there's no drama around it. There's no italicized or underlining. It's just written in plain font in your mind, so to speak. You just hear the message, and it's almost like in that movie, Field of Dreams, if you build it, he will come. That wasn't said with any emotionality behind it, and it wasn't, it was just said very matter-of-factly.
I remember working in a business coaching company at one point in my career. I was an employee. And at some point, I just got the message, oh, this has run its course.
Right.
I'm done here.
Yep.
Now, it still took a lot longer for all the play out of that. But the moment was very clear. And I remember sitting in my cubicle in my chair, and it's like, oh, this has run its course. And it wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a big thing, but it was clear to me. And it didn't go away. Is another test when we're struck by our intuition. Those things don't go away. If we don't listen to them, they can even haunt us even more.
So in that moment of clarity, you might have not had an emotional response, but perhaps later on, it's like, oh God, that's inconvenient.
Yes.
That means I have to look for another job, or what next? Will I be financially okay? So it sounds like, yes, it's kind of, it's a fairly known sequence. It starts off rather objective, and then it could proceed into a very emotional experience.
One of my favorite stories in the book, again, is an amazing entrepreneur who was a consultant, a high-level consultant to a lot of corporations, but then he had this epiphany that he needed to create a psychology of eating institute. So he actually created the Psychology of Eating Institute on the psychology of eating and all the emotional, his name's Mark David out there, and all the issues that come up around emotions and eating and all the stuff all the baggage that we all have to work through on some level. And so he had this amazing epiphany that was so exciting in the moment. It was so clear that he needed to create an institute where people came to him. He wasn't consulting and going to everybody else in the piecemeal ways that he was running his business. So the first moment was clear and excitement, and then came the, oh, shite. There's like 29,000 steps to get there.
Yeah.
And this feels really daunting right now.
Right.
So that was the emotional piece he had to work through. Even though he was clear, the bell was clear, but he still had to figure all that out and get the help he needed.
Such a great differentiation. People often use the expression, trust your gut. And I know that generally does well. And it sounds like there are times when it might not do well under the disguise of an emotional response rather than a genuine intuitive response. And it sounds like part of the thing that you do is continue to help people differentiate, to become more embodied in their process, to really feel. It sounds like this is not an intellectual exercise. This is a body exercise. But tell me if I've got that wrong.
No, that's actually spot on. And this is where it is so confronting, I think, for a lot of us who've never been trained to be more somatically oriented. And how do I start to listen to what my body's telling me? So the three places we typically get stuck in not living from our intuitive intelligence. Number one, we don't know how to listen to our intuitive language because we each have a unique language. And so that's step number one, is how do I identify my intuitive language, which we can get into in a bit. Step two is I might know what I'm feeling, but I don't trust it. I'm going to trust the boss instead, even though I'm a new employee. What kind of authority do I have? Even though my system's going off right now, that we shouldn't delay the project another quarter.
Right.
But the boss says do it. So who am I to say?
Right.
So think about all the ways that we outsource our authority, which is really the crime of not living from our intuitive intelligence.
What a tragedy.
We're outsourcing our authority to the data in the spreadsheet or the louder voices in the room, when so often it's our very voice that needs to be heard in the meeting space.
Right.
Or the planning session. So that's the travesty of the second one, is we don't trust what we feel. The third one is I know exactly the conversation I need to have. I'm just afraid to do it.
Sure.
So it's not taking action on our intuitive intelligence. And that's the ultimate betrayal in one way, is I actually know what I'm feeling. I know what the right move is, and I'm just not ready to have that conversation. and I'm gonna opt out.
You know, this may not be directly related to intuition, but please tell me if it is. I'm going to share a faceplant I made last year. I wrote a perfect graduation speech. I was asked to speak at my son's graduation. I sit on the board for his school. I wrote something that was just, I poured my heart into it, hours and hours, slaved over every word, got up onto the podium and decided to read it. And it just didn't go well. Mm. And I wonder if I had just written the speech and allowed my intuition to drive the speech afterward, would that have, I know for sure, because I've done it before, it generally goes much better. But I was so proud of the words I'd written that I didn't want to lose a single word. But I wonder, is that a function of intuition, the ability to really just connect with one's heart while at the podium?
Great question. I would say yes. The short answer is yes. And we do this all the time when we're working with a lot of, sales, people who are doing sales pitches or people who are doing investment pitches to an investment board. And what I have found is the sweet spot is, how do you actually think about the powerful bullet points and the speaking points that you do want to name? Like, what are your anchor points that you don't want to forget that are important in your speech? And how can you also trust the process that in the moment you're going to be able to, as you've said, first connect with my audience in a human way, in a heartful way, right? And then secondly, how do I also allow room for spontaneity and fluidity and trust that my subconscious has this? Life has my back. Right. And as long as I'm prepared and I've done my homework and I got my bullet points, trusting that I have the right stories and that I'm going to be able to respond in the moment that's required.
Earlier you spoke about the inner critic, and I think that comes into play here. Probably on some level, there was an inner critic that said, this has to be a perfect speech, and therefore I must read it. Yeah. And well, I'm overstating. It wasn't a full faceplant. People did like it, but it was nowhere near the speech it could have been. And I think I was really allowing my inner critic to drive me. And I was wondering if you could unpack, what do you mean when you say the inner critic?
So the inner critic is that voice inside of us that is constantly narrating our life. It's the story we have about ourselves. Right. And it's usually not a positive story. Yep. And we all have one. I've never met a human being that doesn't have an inner critic still to this point in my life. And so how do you know it's active? Usually it's that part of you that's comparing yourself to other people. Yep. And usually you come up short. Yep. Or you could be inflated on the other side and grandiose also. Exactly. But that's also the other side of insecurity. Sure. And so the inner critic will have you convinced that you're not enough, that you're too much, that you're not thin enough, smart enough, experienced enough, whatever that thing is. Fill in your favorite blank. Yep. And I'm sure everyone listening can already locate their version of that. Sure. And so the danger here is, and the inner critic comes from our old programming as children. And so it's the messages that we received and we swallowed whole before we had a chance to digest, wait, does that actually fit for me? Right. Just because mom or dad thinks I'm this or that, or because society or my religion or culture thinks I'm this or that, or boys shouldn't cry and girls shouldn't get angry, or whatever messages we got, how much that goes so deep when we're impressionable as little kids that stays with us our whole life until we have the opportunity to reprogram and deprogram those old tapes. And this is where I love a lot of the work, like Dr. Joe Dispenza, for example. Sure. Or Dr. John DeMartini. And there's a lot of great people out there who are really focused on how you can actually rewire your brain with neuroplasticity, with new pathways and new thought patterns and new identities of self. So that's what's so powerful about distinguishing your inner critic and that familiar voice from the voice of your intuition is so paramount, because one is sourced in wisdom and connecting with your surroundings, and one is trying to hijack and control. The other one's trying to relate. I would say intuition's trying to relate. The inner critic is trying to control and manage.
Yeah, and I imagine there are times when the inner critic is actually helpful.
Yes, and in fact, that's actually the beauty, is there's always a positive intent to the inner critic.
Sure.
It's always trying to protect us in some way, shape, or form. And so I have chapter 5 in my book is fully dedicated to the inner critic, because my whole book is about the 6 steps to access your intuition. And once I realized step number 2, that you can slow down and eliminate the outer noise by eliminating your distractions in your busy world and breathing and slowing down. Step number 3 is, well, there's still the inner noise. And I can be alone, but I am just chirping away over here and I can't get any peace of mind.
Sure.
And so until we do a little bit of work around that and separating from the inner critic, then it's easier to access our intuitive intelligence.
So I was kind of thinking about the antenna in the form of, kind of a superimposed muscle on it. And I'm wondering, what are some practices that the listeners can engage in to access their intuition to a greater degree on the daily?
Okay. Number 1 is disrupt your routine. So we talked about earlier sleepwalking Monday through Friday, Saturday through the weekend.
Yes.
And so how do we consciously disrupt our normal ways of thinking? Because right away, that's going to have us start to think outside the box. Because the routine is the box. And so this is where I love what Steve Jobs used to do. He would, when he started to fry out on screen time, even back then, he would literally get up, walk outside the Apple campus in Cupertino, barefoot, and slowly walk around the block around the campus. And it was in those moments he reported having these amazing epiphanies and these intuitive ideas of the next solutions that were needing to come forward in whatever problem solving he was doing, or a new invention he was downloading, or a new way to do something. That's what he did, is he would get out of what he knew, get away from screen time, and literally walk around in nature around the block barefoot, because that gets you to slow down also. And he would start to enter a different flow state, a different mind state also. And literally, that's where our intuition can find us. Because if we're in that hunter-seeker mode, we're trying to find our intuition, but we actually have to be receptive first so it can find us. And so that's step number 1, is disrupt your routine.
Love it.
Number 2, slow down and breathe. Literally, find, whether it's counting to 5 or 10. One thing I like to do is what the Navy SEALs use. They call it box breathing, where you inhale for a 4 count, hold it for a 4 count, exhale for a 4 count, and then hold that for a 4 count. And that's the box. And so it's amazing, because what it does for the Navy SEALs, when they're in a chaotic environment, and if anyone out there has recently been in a chaotic environment, you'll know what I'm talking about. It's the best thing to do to sync you up as a team and get your nervous systems synced up and ground you and actually activate your vagus nerve, which strengthens your immune system and your intuitive response capabilities. They've spent multi-millions of dollars studying intuitive decision-making and research in the Navy SEAL programs. And they call it their Spidey sense. They're trying to get their elite forces to develop their Spidey sense, because they need to have that advantage when you're in these hostile territories. So if the military is doing it, why aren't we?
It's brilliant. And just to let you know, I also do box breathing. I endorse box breathing with the people I teach it to them. Sometimes, for example, if I'm on my way to my doctor and I have a 3:00 appointment and I get through traffic, get through parking, get in there, it's 2:58, I'm a little bit stressed. They throw a cuff onto me to see what my blood pressure is, and it's high initially because of the stress that was incurred. And I will say to the medical assistant, watch this. And I do some box breathing, and lo and behold, it's normal. So I can actually take it from high to normal very quickly with that practice you just recommended. So, and now you're describing it as a tool for accessing greater intuition. I love it.
One of the executives I'm working with right now, I could tell as soon as he got on the coaching call with me, he was in panic about all the things going on with COVID and the factory. And of course I understand. And he was just not able to take in any information because he was already in a frantic place. And so we got into this habit of doing the box breathing before we even spoke in our coaching call.
Amazing.
And everything started to shift. And he was so much more present, alert, intuitive, and was able to connect the dots because now his subconscious had time to do that.
Sure.
And his conscious mind could actually understand what was happening. And then now he does that before he goes into a stressful team meeting with the higher ups in the leadership team, or if he's got a big crisis he's got to handle on the factory line. He's got a whole new skill set that he didn't have before, and it's making a huge impact.
So important to do that, and you're also accessing your parasympathetic nervous system in those moments, which really allows us to make smarter decisions in those moments. That's just great. Any other practices people can bring on?
I see when we're kind of giving you the cheat sheet here. So if we go back to disrupt your routine, slow down and breathe. Number 3 is going to be ask a question. This is where you're engaging your intuitive intelligence, your inner mentor. Think about this. We are so okay with getting an external mentor in our business life or relationship coaches or therapists, but we have a lot of resistance to tuning into our inner mentor. And that's, to me, what our intuition actually is. It's that inner guidance that our consciousness is much smarter than we give it credit for on a day-to-day basis. So why wouldn't I use my inner resource, especially when there's so much noise in the space right now and so much misinformation and disinformation in the media right now? Now is the most important time to double down on my inner resources. So when I can ask a question, when I'm in a more settled place because of my breathing, then I can start to track my intuitive signals. When I say, hey, should we hire this candidate? And then what do I notice in my bodily experience when I run that simulation? And then I look at choice B. What happens if we don't hire that candidate? What do I notice in my experience from there without judging anything? Just what do I notice? Do I get open? Do I get closed? Do I notice a palpitation in my throat? Or my gut gets tight? Like, just what do I notice? Do I see words and pictures, or I hear sounds? I hear an audio message. And by the way, these are some of the intuitive languages that we're talking about. The audio intuitive, the visual intuitive, the body intuitive. Some people report from their dream states. They get subconscious messaging through their dreams.
Sure.
Other people report a sense of all-knowing or cognizance, where they just know. They just know.
That's great.
So these are the key things. If our listeners want to practice these, this is what's going to take you to that next level.
You know, I found myself, first of all, thanks for those tips. They're great cheat sheet. I found myself thinking about confidence as it pertains to intuition. It almost seems like it's a chicken and egg situation. It seems that in order to access our intuition, we need to have the confidence to do so. And in order to be confident, we need to access our intuition as well. I'm wondering, what are your thoughts about the relationship between confidence and intuition, and is there one?
It's a great question. I do think it takes confidence to be willing to learn and be receptive in a new way, and to learn a different channel of information. And so it does take confidence to not just go with the conformity of the status quo around us, but how to listen to the space between the notes, the zeros between the ones, if you will, right? That's the intuitive space, is the zeros between the ones. And all you techies know what I'm talking about. But also listening to that deepest reservoir of our intelligence is what gives us our deepest confidence. And so here's what I would say: just like any skill that you're building, it takes practice. So whether I'm learning a new instrument, I don't get up on stage right away and play the French horn. I go to my room and I practice and I learn the scales. And maybe then I invite my brother or sister into the room to give them a couple riffs and see what their reaction is. And then maybe the neighbors, I can see if they're opening the window or closing the window.
Right.
And so for me, intuition's the same, is with the biggest critical decisions, how can I start practicing on the small decisions? What if I start practicing today on, should we go get takeout tonight or just make leftovers and whip something up here? And what actually feels best for the highest good right now, for our whole family situation? And what if I start using that even on what might seem trivial, but you're actually sharpening your discernment every time you do that, because you're going to start to feel the difference when you're led to choice A or B based on that deeper intelligence.
Fantastic. Well, Rick, we're kind of coming to the end, and I'm wondering, before I ask you my very final question, is there something I should have asked but haven't yet asked?
I think that question right there, that was great. I think the main point I want to make here is, once again, there's a big difference between emotional reactivity and also magical thinking, which in both of those I call bullshit intuition versus real intuition. And so magical thinking is also, oh, I saw a dove go by when I was on a date. That means she's the one.
Right. So that's more like superstition.
Superstition. Oh, just because a black cat went by, my whole week is going to be screwed.
Yes.
Right.
And haven't we all done that?
Right. And so there's a big difference between superstition and magical thinking, and listening to our intuitive intelligence that's speaking to us through our neural network in our body. It's interacting with the environment.
I'm so glad you brought that one up, because I think that people may lose their confidence around their intuition because they erroneously either had a superstitious moment or perhaps, as you were talking about earlier, an emotional moment that they thought was intuition, and somehow intuition gets a bad name.
Yes.
Bad PR, and that's a shame.
It gets terrible PR, which is the big reason why this movement is happening around intuitive intelligence and what we're doing. And just a side note, one of the coolest things about artificial intelligence right now, because I'm actually in conversation with a lot of AI designers and creators and architects, guess what they're studying? They're studying intuition, consciousness, and neuroscience. Because they're trying to figure out, how do humans do the things that they can do that computers can't do still? How do we jump to that intuitive intelligence? How do we utilize our deepest wisdom and connect the dots in ways that the machines can't even touch? And so because AI is here and it's going to continue to be even more prevalent, now is the time to double down in what makes us most human and get curious in our ingenuity, in our innovative way of being.
And someone might say the AI, I mean, in light of what you're saying, I find myself wondering, what about the person who says, well, Rick, if AI is learning it, what's the point of me learning it? Because they will be our Lord and Master someday. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that is the big question is this going to be Skynet from the Terminator, or is this going to be Star Trek, where we explore the galaxy together? Mm-hmm. I'm voting for Star Trek.
Yes, I am too.
And what's interesting is, and this is where it gets more into quantum physics and what have you, they're starting to detect that the consciousness of the coder and programmer influences the AI.
Wow.
So that's why this is important. It's important to not be run by our hijacking inner critic and our paranoia and our fear. And how can we actually come into our deeper wisdom and consciousness that actually is trying to connect with life on all levels? And AI is part of life also, even though it might look and feel a little different. It's something that we have created. It's our child in this bizarre way, right? It's our child.
Sure.
It's the stepchild we have to learn to reckon with.
You know, what's funny is today, just a side note, I was corresponding with an executive and her administrative assistant, and I had this really great, correspondence going on with this executive assistant, and she was very pleasant and helpful, and she was amazing. And lo and behold, the executive revealed to me, by the way, she's an AI. And so the entire time, I'd been thanking her for her hard work, and so that was odd.
Great. There's gonna be a lot more of those moments coming.
Oh my goodness, perhaps so, and maybe more Star Trek than Skynet. So if you had the ability to somehow magically give every citizen of the planet greater intuition, what do you think would be the net result, both individually and societally? What would happen to the people individually and to their communities?
For me, it's exactly speaking to this moment of this pandemic and what a lot of people are calling the great pause moment or the Great Reset. And what I'm intuiting, and a lot of other people out there are intuiting, is part of what's happened is we become so disconnected from ourselves, from each other, and from the planet. And so in these pause moments, we're seeing the breakdown of infrastructure, the breakdown of, are we either going to come together and work together to solve this global phenomenon, or are we going to go back to our lesser angels and our ego and our greed and all those kinds of things? And so for me, when I'm connected to my intuition, it gets me out of the me agenda into the we space, into what wants to happen in this team meeting, what wants to happen in this environment, what wants to happen with our national approach to this threat out there. How do we want to come together and bring our collaboration and our collective mindset and intelligence together? So for me, intuition, waving that magic wand, connects me even more directly to myself, to other, and to the greater environment immediately in real time.
So it sounds like good things would happen.
Good things would happen. And will happen. So I think that's our great opportunity right now with this challenge is, do we learn how to approach life through a different channel that actually might be more enjoyable and more generative than what we've been trying to do?
Well, may it come to pass that your wonderful book is read by more so that more people can engage in the we of us as a collective, and that they may tap to a greater ability and into their own selves. I think everybody benefits. So, Rick, I can't thank you enough for meeting with me and sharing your wisdom.
Such an honor to be with you. And I love this podcast. I love your questions. And I really feel you in the conversation with me, which makes it so much more alive and fun. So thank you for what you do too.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for that reflection, Rick. This is Dr. Adam Dorsey thanking you for listening to Super Psyched. To listen to other great episodes or to get more information about today's episode, please visit me at my website, dradamdorsey.com. That's DradamDorsay.com, and click the Super Psyched podcast link.